Hi, everybody. This is David Nevins for City Biz, and thank you so much for joining our program today. And today we have a very special guest, and he is Bob Cohn, President and CEO of the Banner, the Baltimore Banner. So, Bob, welcome to our program. Let me start with that.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I was going to ask you about your background, but I think the more important thing that you'd like to talk about, we'll get to your background, is the Banner. Tell us about the Banner, what it is you're doing, and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, so the Baltimore Banner is an online news operation. We're like a newspaper, but we're only digital, and we're committed to covering Baltimore and Greater Maryland and trying to inform and strengthen and inspire the people of Baltimore and surrounding areas and the communities in order to make sure that local news thrives and that the people in the region have an understanding of the issues and the people and the important conversations in their community.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've been doing this for just about 2 years now. So happy birthday to the Banner. And, you know, it's interesting. We live in a time when it's local news has been challenged, right? I mean, Apple and all of similar sites, they don't do a great job of covering local news. They do national news and what have you. So how did the Banner come to be, Bob? And again, a little more detail about what you're hoping to achieve and how it's been going so far in terms of readers and subscribers and so forth.
Yeah, sure. Well, so the Banner grows out of what you just mentioned, which is the crisis in local news. People talk about a journalism crisis. There is, in fact, no crisis when it comes to national or international news in terms of volume of content. People might have a quibble with the quality of the content or the degree to which there is polarization of national and international, which is an area I come out of. But there's a lot. If you want to understand what's happening in Gaza or in Ukraine or in Hunter Biden's trial, there's no dearth of sources for that. But when it comes to local news across this country, there is a real crisis. 2/3 of newsroom jobs in America have been lost in the last 15 years, wiped away. And in last year, in 2023, 10 local news sites or newspapers shut down every month, 10 every month. So we're at a point where there are a lot of news deserts and places where publications still exist. They have a fraction of the journalists that they used to have. So we grow out of that observation that there's a crisis in local news. And before I came up, we are 2 years old, literally this week. I've just been here 4 months, but the Banner was founded when Stewart Bainum, who is a Maryland businessman, the chairman of Choice Hotels, thought that this local crisis was serious, and he actually came in with a desire to buy the Baltimore Sun back when it was run by a hedge fund, and made a pretty good go at it, and they almost bought it. And then when that didn't work, he decided to start a separate Baltimore-based publication, really with those same goals, to be a trusted and indispensable source of news and information for the people of Maryland. And so we've been at that now for 2 years this week. And I would say things are going very well. We now have 49,000 paying subscribers. We have 80 people, 80 journalists in our newsroom, about 125 at the company. We have a couple million page views every month. And we are on our way to what is the second part of our mission. If the first is to do that kind of indispensable journalism, the second is to, over time, and not too long a time, become self-sustaining, so that the generosity from Stewart Bainum and his family, when that runs out, because that was really just runway to get us going, we are self-sustaining, and we are on path to do that in a few years' time. And that's an important part of the mission as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And you know what I tell people, I'm a news junkie, and I think you are too. And we'll talk about your background in just a second. but your industry, as opposed to what many people think, the news business, the newspaper business, whatever you want to call it, it's not dying so much as it's changing, right? I mean, my first job ever, I delivered newspapers. I was a newspaper boy. So you don't have newspaper. No one has newspaper boys anymore. I don't think. And even the printed paper is going to likely be pretty soon a thing of the past. And we all know about the news that Apple and Amazon and others have delivered and can deliver, but it doesn't tell you about what your governor is up to, your mayor is up to, the local business community is up to. So I think that you're hopefully in the right spot and can continue to grow your readership in this regard.
Well, you're so right about the kind of convulsive change that's happened in this industry just in the not so short, but short enough time of my own career. I started working in the mid 1980s, and it was basically advertising supported media, and there was a lot of money in the business, and it was a good place for entrepreneurs or established families to make money. This was a thriving business, and any number of things conspired to make this difficult, including the arrival of the internet and people's disenchantment with news and the news avoidance that's going on now, the polarization, the fact that the barriers to entry, a Substack for zero investment is out there competing with the New York Times, and some days it's competing well, or those individual Substacks are. So in many ways, in some ways, this is good for consumers of journalism, except for the fact that the internet and lowering barriers to entry also creates a lot of noise, and that's been a problem. But for the business of journalism, it's been miserable, and that's kind of it's a series of new technologies that have come in and forced newspaper owners and media entrepreneurs to continue to adjust. And I've ridden this weird wave from print to digital, from edit to business, here comes social, here comes video, here comes events. There's a lot there's a lot of turbulence in this industry.
And Bob, I think it's important to note, you alluded to it, but I'd like to maybe ask you to just take a minute and give us a little more detail. Your model at the Banner is pretty different. You're not trying to make a profit. I mean, you are trying to generate revenue through advertising and events and subscriptions, but you are a not-for-profit organization, and that's the model that you hope or expect, correct me if I'm wrong, will someday be quite prevalent in the news industry.
That's right. So we started as a nonprofit, and there are a number of nonprofit news organizations that have kind of cropped up in recent years. What makes the Banner somewhat unusual, if not unique, is the scale at which we came at the problem, because Stuart Bainum decided go big or go home. So they put a lot of money in right at the outset, and then built that newsroom to the point where we have 80 people after just 2 years. But the notion of a nonprofit approach is, while somewhat new, is now quite popular. And in our case, because we have a fairly large cost basis with the size of our teams, there's an obligation to generate enough revenue that we can break even once that the Bainum runway dries up. And so from that perspective, I'm running the operation like with multiple revenue streams and resilience built in, like a for-profit. But the difference is, when we hit sustainability, the first dollar we make goes back into the journalism. There are no shareholders, there are no stakeholders. The Bainums aren't expecting to get their initial seed funding back. That was a donation. And we will turn the corner and we will be profitable, quote unquote, as a nonprofit, and that money will go directly into the newsroom and into the journalism.
Yeah, so it strikes me that it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I know it's gone real well so far. That most all hospitals in Maryland, for example, are nonprofits, and most universities in Maryland. And so if you go to a school at a not-for-profit, you pay them a tuition, and you may also make a donation. And likewise, if you get treated well your local hospital, you pay the hospital bill, and then they come after you as well for a donation. In many ways, you're trying to do the same thing. It strikes me that you pay for your subscription to the Banner, and you're also trying to educate the community such that they understand that if they want local news coverage to continue and thrive, maybe they should consider supporting this endeavor as well. Did I get that right?
Yeah, 100%. The only thing I would add is if you are a subscriber to the Baltimore Banner, you have done your part. We are happy to have that support. We are
Okay.
we are looking for development resources from local foundations, from wealthy individuals, from national foundations. And so I wouldn't want people to think if they subscribe, the first thing they do is then get hit up for a pledge drive. We don't do that.
Right.
About 20% of our revenue this year will be from philanthropy, not including the Bain philanthropy, but that is mostly Baltimore area foundations or wealthy families who are supporting the business because of the reasons you point out. If you care about making sure that local journalism survives here, but 80% of our revenue is coming from more traditional sources, chiefly subscriptions, which is 50%, and then advertising and events, which is another 30%. And having those multiple revenue streams is critical in two ways. First, because this industry has been so destabilizing that it's good to not rely on any one source. But two, um, I, I like the fact that we are largely reader supported because that aligns the newsroom with the business model. The more great content we make that satisfies our readers, our subscription dollars. In the old days, and I worked in the advertising based model for many years, and of course we still quite rely on that. You were mostly trying to your revenue depended on pleasing advertisers, not on pleasing readers. Or it was a
Right.
bank, you had to please enough readers to attract a big advertiser, but it was still a bit of a ricochet. And the consumer revenue model helps align with the interests of the newsroom, which is to create great content that people want to read.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately what it's all about. I mean, obviously you want to sell advertising, but you can't sell advertising if, for the most part, people weren't drawn to you because of your basic content.
Yeah.
And as they say, an educated and an informed society is a better one, right? And newspaper reporters and news reporters, particularly local ones, have been responsible, and locally, this is probably doubly true, have been responsible for so much change in the community, and it wouldn't happen otherwise.
Oh, absolutely. But let me say one other thing about the model, but then I'd like to respond to that point too. Um, there's been this kind of hand wringing over the last decade about advertising dying. I would say that we have overperformed relative to our expectations on advertising. So it's not a place you can put all of your bets. We still need the subscription revenue, but the Baltimore community, the Baltimore business community in particular, has been very supportive of the work we're doing and understands that we're attracting the kind of audience that they want to reach. So there's still a thriving advertising market. And of course, to your second point, uh, so much of what we learn about the functioning of our institutions, whether they be government or education or religion or business, is because journalists have asked hard questions and sought to find the truth.
No question about that. Bob, you briefly alluded to or mentioned a couple of minutes ago the New York Times, one of the nation's premier newspapers, I guess, along with the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, and whatever examples you want. But the Banner and the New York Times recently announced an interesting partnership that resulted in some fascinating stories that I've read thus far. Would you share with our viewers a little bit more about that?
Yes, thanks for that. We are in partnership with the New York Times for a series of stories on the opioid epidemic in Baltimore. We had 3 reporters working on this for the better part of a year. The first piece ran about 10 days ago, both in the Banner and on the New York Times website. And then a day later, it ran on the front page of the New York Times in print, and it jumped to 4 full pages inside of the New York Times. We've since had 2 other stories as part of this partnership. In all these cases, the bylines, the stories are written by Banner writers, but the kind of the superstructure of this and the editing is part of the New York Times local investigative initiative, and that's how the partnership happened. So we're getting the benefit of the Times' powerful distribution and their exceptional editing, and they're getting the benefit of our on-the-ground reporters and photographers. All the photos were taken by our journalists. There's more to come in this series in the partnership, and then we will continue to follow this at the Banner over time. But it's been a powerful set of stories that has exposed the extent to which in Baltimore the opioid epidemic and transforming from heroin to fentanyl over the years has been much worse than in other cities on a per capita basis. 6,000 deaths in Baltimore over 6 years. And so we've been asking questions of city leaders, of state leaders. We did a story devoted to the fact that the number 1 cohort, the victim cohort, are Black men ages 50 to 70. And if you take that cohort out, actually Baltimore's pretty much on par with some other big cities. So a lot of data analysis. We had a full-time data reporter on this, and I'm just really proud of the work.
That's great. Well, I've been reading the stories, and I can't say that I enjoy them because they're powerful and sad in so many ways, but important for sure.
Yep, thank you.
So, Bob, let me ask you in closing. I thought about doing this in the beginning, but I didn't, so we'll do it at the end. You are, relatively speaking, new to the Banner in your role as president and CEO, and you bring to this position quite an accomplished resume, having headed a number of national and international news organizations. Tell us a little bit about your career and what attracted you to Baltimore in the end.
Thank you. Yeah, so most of my career I was a journalist. I started as a writer covering politics in Washington, and then I made over time became an editor, and then I switched from print to digital, and I ran digital news operations, and then I switched to the business side. And so I went from writing to editing, print to digital, and edit to business. And I did that at some really interesting places. I was at Newsweek for the first 10 years, and I covered the White House, and before that, the Supreme Court and the Justice Department. I was out in California for a few years, about 12 years, and I was the executive editor, the number 2 editor of Wired magazine, which is a Condé Nast title about technology and culture and society and everything. And then I moved back to Maryland, and I went to the Atlantic, where I spent about 11 years. And the first half of that was to try to get off the ground the Atlantic digital operation. The Atlantic, when I got there in 2008, was, of course, an excellent 150-year-old print publication coming out 10 times a year and staring on the barrel at a digital revolution that we needed to be part of. So I ran the digital editorial operations there, and we got the Atlantic.com kind of humming. And then unaccountably and weirdly, I jumped over to the business side, and I spent the last 10 years of my life into business leadership roles, first at the Atlantic, where I was president, and then I spent 4 years at The Economist, where I was president of The Economist. And then I came here.
Well, we're fortunate and lucky to have you, and only hope that your leadership at the Banner is as significant as so many of those previous positions that you mentioned.
I'm really liking it. I'm so thrilled I made the decision. What I found that I enjoyed when I was leaving The Economist and thinking about what I might want to do now, it was taking working in places that were growing from small to medium or from medium to large, and not so much steering legacy organizations that were trying to navigate the kind of obstacle course of media these days. That being more entrepreneurial, being in more of a startup environment, was something, and it really traced back to my first 5 years at the Atlantic, where even though the operation was 150 years old, we on the digital side were doing all new things and pretty much starting from scratch. And I was attracted to that. I was attracted to the puzzle of local journalism and the crisis in local journalism. I didn't know much about Baltimore, but I've now been here 4 months, and it's a great city, and I'm learning a lot, and the people are terrific, and I couldn't be happier with the decision.
So, what's your favorite thing about Baltimore so far, Bob?
Well, it's got to be the Orioles. I mean, I have the zeal of a convert when it comes to, I grew up I'm from Chicago. I grew up as a Cubs fan, which was a miserable team to like in the 70s when I was in Chicago. So to walk into a winning team, and it's like so that's great. And I spent a lot of time in Washington. Washington is a cynical town. I'm only 40 miles away from there. There are so many people rooting for the Banner and rooting for Baltimore here. There's no cynicism at all, and I mean, people want us to succeed, but they want Baltimore to succeed too.
Right.
And I'm loving that. I think that's it's refreshing after spending a bunch of my career in the nation's capital.
That's great. And Bob, so how does someone learn more about the Banner, whether they're interested in subscribing, advertising, whatever the case may be?
The BaltimoreBanner.com. You can come check out our content, sign up for newsletters. The newsletters are free. You can read some stories for free before we ask you to join and be a subscriber of the digital operation. And you can get to our advertising from there too. You can also write me at bob@thebaltimorebanner.com, and I will seek to answer or pawn off on someone smarter than me your question. But yeah, we'd love to just have you as a reader. And you can start with the newsletters or the push alerts, and get a sense of what we're trying to do here.
Bob, thank you so much for your time today, and best of luck with your efforts. They seem to be going well. We appreciate your time.
Great, David. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. This has been David Nevins for City Biz. Our guest has been Bob Cohn, President and CEO of the Baltimore Banner. Check them out. Thank you for watching. It's been good to have you.